I'm Tia. People know me as Tia or Chris, simply because I used different name when I was younger. I'm a self-employed business owner running a digital marketing and design studio based in Bali. And I perform a theatrical performance based on BDSM and kink in Bali as well. Been here about 10 years now. Originally from Jakarta, born and raised, coming with a little dream, so to speak, thinking of a better life of freedom. And the island of God has been a very, very welcoming place to be. Yeah. I learned that my, how do I say this? That insecurities, my insecurities are still there, and I'm really trying hard to kind of overcome it. But yeah, that's pretty much what I recently learned about myself. My biggest insecurity at the moment is the fact that, like, even though I'm just about to hit 30 this year, my energy and physicality and body image, etc., is kind of going down a little bit than who I was. But I'm trying to overcome it in a way that, like, it's part of living, it's part of growing, it's part of getting older, and there's nothing wrong about it. And I'm sure, like, at certain age or level, I'll regain it back when I have more free time to go to gym or or do a little bit more aerobic, I don't know, or maybe have more sex.
How do you deal with it? I mean, what do you do like to manage it?
Well, a lot of realizations, but also just accepting it, embracing it, not pushing myself too hard about it. A lot of the times, people in our generations, they mostly very, everything about social media is fantastic in terms of business. I work in social media, but it's also not so good because it creates this kind of imagery where, like, oh, you have to be this certain body type. Oh, you have to be, you have to have a butt that's shaped like that. Like, it creates a lot of that beauty standard that is not necessarily applicable to everyone. But at the same time, I think it's more, for me, it's more like, okay, like, it's a goal, but also, like, I'm not gonna, like, punch myself trying to, like, yeah, you gotta do these things. I have other goals that I want to achieve right now. And I mean, look at, like, our earlier generations, they'll be like 40s, even 50s, and they're freaking fit. So I know, like, at a certain stage in their life back then, they're probably freaking, sluggish and fat and, like, whatever, but they get to a point where, like, they're financially secure, their career is amazing, they have more time to do other things, and when they do, they get fit. That's basically my strategy. So I grew up in a typical middle-class Muslim family in Jakarta, with an edge of that. When I was born, my dad was already, like, 45 years old plus, so it's a big generation gap that when I become older, it become more and more evident that our values are just different. And then basically, long story short, I'm a broken home kid, so my parents got divorced when I was, like, around 8 years old or something. There was a bit of, say, violence around without necessarily involving me, but I witnessed some, and I pretty much got saved away from that for a few years, living with my auntie, who is my father's little sister. Growing up was pretty much a nerd. I got bullied a lot throughout my elementary school, my junior high school, but senior high is a bit pretty much almost the same. But I sort of gained a little bit more confidence and knowing how to deal with bullies and whatnot. And that's also when I started to realize that I have sexual preference or sexual orientations that are not straight. And then by the time I was in university, pretty much I came out of the closet, told my parents about it. He's not very happy. And I also told him that I don't think I can relate with Islam, and I don't think it's fair to call myself a Muslim for that reason. And that kind of rolling into something else in a way that like I got disowned by my own parents, well, particularly my father. And knowing how Jakarta was as a society, I thought I was like, no, this is not for me. I need to be somewhere else that allow me to be me, and that's pretty much kind of like connected from what was happening in my childhood and where I am now in Bali. Most of the time back then, I mean, I couldn't do anything. I would cry almost every day coming home from school because some girls just like call me like, oh, I'm ugly and all this sort of crap. No boy's gonna be with you, or like, you're so ugly nobody wants you. How I dealt with that back then was not good. But then at the third year of my junior high, I pretty much faced my bully and we got into a physical fight. She was back then one of the popular girl in the school, and I got really angry at one point, and I said to her, I was like, no, you know what? You don't get to bully me again. Stop this, or I'm gonna punch you. And she said, oh, like kind of like challenging me, and I was like, okay, cool. Just basically fighting right at the gate of the school to a point where like our friends were like watching, and they're like, holy moly, it's like Tia's gone into a fight and all this sort of crap. But it taught me a lot of that turning point when I used to be the nerdy kid that got bullied, to a point where I can try to stood up for myself, and that becomes an integrated pattern that I just don't like it when that kind of things happened. Nowadays, when I see something similar, or if I feel like I'm getting bullied, then I'll just call it straight. I just call it out. That's pretty much how I deal with it. I mean, this sounds probably very cliche, but people tend to obviously see the physical beauty first, which is absolutely normal, I think. A visual cue is how we know things, typically from the very first get-go, but talking and communicating and get to know a person, and I think that's much more of I think would be more a better indicator of what a person's beauty is. I've met, pretty girls who are very, very kind-hearted, very very genuine, and I've met pretty girls who are very fake. I've met say those who are considered less in this, the mainstream beauty standard, who are also not so sincere, not so genuine, and tend to have a very, very egotistical way of thinking. And I've met also those ones who are a bit more humble and very kind-hearted as well.
How long was it, the process that you finally realized, oh, I have to love myself? Like, how long?
It's years. I'm almost 30 this year, and I dare to say it's a never-ending process, because the older you get, the more insecurities you'll find about yourself. But the breakthrough, I would say, for me was 2019. My father passed away at the end of 2018, and not long after, I met a man who eventually we kind of become together, but then I quickly realized that it becomes one of the most toxic, abusive relationship I've ever been in my life. And not until we broke up, I found out that he has bipolar and alcohol abuse problem. And back then I used to feel like I need to save this guy, I need to help this guy because I love him. But unfortunately at that time I was like also losing myself bit by bit. Like I'm losing my personalities. I'm losing my ability to be independent, to feel independent, to feel having an individual sovereignty over my own, say, body and stuff. And eventually I walk away. It was a hard process. Took months at a time, but since then, I dare say it's really important that whoever that I'm in a relationship with, that we're both two individuals. We're not one. We'll never be one, so to speak. So when people say, oh, you're my soulmate, you complete me, we are one, and all these sort of things, I find it really like redundant in a way, and that's when I start to also like really embracing what it means about self-love and establishing boundaries, healthy boundaries, not like, this is my boundary, but you don't get to like you don't get to have your boundary. That's not right. But it's most of the time, the way I see it is more like, okay, this is the way I'm doing my self-love, and that's pretty much it. I would say trust your gut a little bit more. Don't fall for sweet talk. And just be your own person, I guess. Just more like self-conscious about things. That's pretty much I would say to my younger self. Because back then I used to be very quote unquote a wimp. I follow people wherever they go. Like some friends would be a little bit more dominant or some sort, and I'll oh yeah, I want to be the cool kid, so I'm gonna follow the cool kids. But now it's more like doesn't really work. I get to be my own cool kid by my own definitions, and people think I'm cool or whatever. Maybe some not, but again, I don't care. Yeah.
Can you tell us about like who are you closest the most? Is it your mom or your dad?
None.
None?
None.
None.
Subconsciously, my dad, subconsciously, but consciously, no. We had a very strained relationship, and I grew up without my biological mom being around. I used to have a stepmother because my father remarried, but that's another long story. But essentially, if we're talking like father figure or mother figure, if we're talking mother figure, I would say my auntie. She was the one who kind of like showing that, you know, affections is affections, not violence is affection, you know. I would say subconsciously I was close to my dad because he was the parent that I grew up with, but we were never, say, like mentally close. More like maybe intellectually, but even that is a hard point because we would always argue about things because we're just two different of generations with two different set of values. But subconsciously he managed to ingrain a certain type of qualities within me, like in terms of like being grit, somewhat ambitious maybe, but knowing where you are and not being a, can I swear?
Yeah.
Not being a about your ambition, and just be humble, and also not giving up. I think that's what he instilled in me, because when we used to argue, I would not back down until he hit me physically. But yeah, it's something that I would say not in terms of who's the closest, etc. Like I pretty much grew up when I was a kid before my dad remarried. I was pretty much taken care by a nanny.
Why did you decide to move to Bali? How was the journey?
Obviously, Indonesia has a lot of province, right? We have a lot of cultures. What I find is that, and it's not necessarily only in Java, I think. It's also in, let's say, Sumatra maybe, or even Sulawesi, because it's so traditional with family values, so to speak. Everybody tends to meddle each other's business in a way that is not consensual in some way. Like, you know, you got your auntie or some uncle meddling in your business and trying to like la 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 la, you know. I don't like that, and it gets worse when you're not conforming to the society. As say, oh, kamu, oh, you're an Indonesian girl. You should, you know, be quote unquote submissive. You should follow your husband. You should get married at this age. All these kind of pressures that just like building up, and I just don't like that. And being someone again who is not, say, is not straight, and deciding not to be related to any religion is also tough. If I live outside, say, if I still live inside Jakarta or Surabaya or Semarang or Riau, whatever, right? Bali, on the other hand, I really love the Balinese. I really love them. They have this certain respect towards other human beings where, like, I guess it's almost like the whole thing about karma pala, right? They're like, as long as you're nice, you'll get nice karma, you know? It's about giving first, not taking. It's about, like, if it works, it works. I just leave it be. As long as I don't, as long as I don't kill somebody or rob somebody or rape somebody, but I'm different. I'm safe. Like I don't get persecuted in a way that because of my identity, and they get like, oh yeah, this will or like, oh you don't belong here, like la la la, like get out. Like that's one of the reasons why I chose Bali in the first place. I didn't really know it back then, obviously, because when I was younger, I was thinking, oh yeah, it's all the sunshine and the beach, and I can work anywhere, and everything is so close. But now, after being here for about 10 years, I realize what I actually really love about Bali is because of its people and its culture and its welcoming nature of people, because of course it's a tourism island, everybody's welcome, but even beyond that, again, obviously you gotta be respectful to them as well before you want to be respected by them. But that's pretty much why and how I moved to Bali.
Now we go to the spicy part.
Okay, we're getting the spicy ones. Okay, so when I was younger, we're talking maybe not necessarily 18, but also not too young. I had my first sexual experience, and it was mediocre at best, I would say. But the second person I had sexual experience with, I was treated in a way that like my body was getting bitten, scratched, a bit of choking, rough play, so to speak. And back then I was like, being a 17-year-old Indonesian woman, not knowing why the she likes being treated that way, and I'm like, what the is wrong with me, right? And but I was like, wait a minute, I don't think it's wrong. I'm sure there's some other people who likes this, but I just don't know where to find it. And this is way back when like dial-up internet was still around. So forget about like fiber optic and stuff. This is like, right? So like it's, you got Yahoo search engine instead of Google search engine, right? So I used to sneak out into my father's office, turn on the computer and trying to Google, well, I say Google, but searching informations about this. And back then, the only thing I could kind of coined in my head was pain lover. Like, or yeah, I don't know. I like pain, like I love pain at that time. So I Google pain lover, and then it comes out as like this whole mumbo jumbo of articles and posters and pictures about BDSM or S&M. And I was like, this is really interesting, and I'm like, I click on it, I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm a masochist. So that's where I started like really digging in. I was like, why some people are like that, why are some people not necessarily masochists, but they can take it, and all those sort of things. And that's how I found out that like that was about 12 years ago. So since then I kind of progressed in a way that like I explored different new things, etc., different partners, different gender, different roles as well, to a point where like I think now a lot of people say, oh, you're either a dominatrix or you're a submissive. I'm like, no. I would call myself a Kinkster. Why Kinkster? Kinkster means essentially somebody who dabbles in kink and BDSM. The only difference is about, obviously, I think between kink and BDSM is that with kink is anything that is non-conventional, but it doesn't necessarily involve power play. BDSM, because you have DS, the dominant and submissive dynamic, that's where you have the power play thing. So it can be very vanilla, but when you have the power play, power exchange happening, that's already DS, that's already BDSM, so to speak.
Do you often get a misconception about this Kinkster
A
lifestyle?
lot. People, most of the time when I speak about this, there's like, oh, you're a weirdo, or you're a creep, or, you know, you're a freak. But like, you know, it's here's the thing, right? A lot of people don't realize this, but everyone has a fantasy, like sexual fantasies, not just one, but like a lot. The only difference between, say, the other bloke and me is that I decide to explore that fantasy and make it happen. Say I'm thinking, oh, I wanna tie a guy, or like, blah blah blah. I do that. Some other people may not have the opportunity of the situations to be able to do that, and I think it's obviously it's a privilege, but also a lot of people nowadays is unfortunately still think that just because you're kinky, you must have a broken home family, or like a violent past, or traumatic experience, etc., to become somebody kinky because you're a lack of this. I can say that's absolutely not true. Kinksters are not necessarily people who dabble because they have some pathological past. I've met people who are absolutely, growing up from a good family. The parents are very loving. They have a very good relationship with their parents, with their kids, and they're still a kinky mother. So it doesn't. The misconception that mostly happens nowadays is those things, and I think people should know that it's not necessarily about that. And people who are kinky are not necessarily serial killer either, because like a lot of people also think that you're a sadist, you like to hit people, you like to hurt people. It's different. With BDSM, you have something called consent. Abuse is a different thing. Being a serial killer, obviously you don't practice consent with your victim. With us, we actually talk first and manage what can we do, what we cannot do with the potential partner that we're going to play with.
Some people may associate BDSM with sex, like always. What is your opinion about that?
Okay, this may sound a little bit controversial. So I think BDSM is essentially not sex, but it is a sexual practice, which may or may not involve sex. A lot of people think, the misconception again, that BDSM always involve penetrative sex, always involve a dick in a pussy in. Not true. But I would be a liar if I would tell you that it's not a sexual practice. You have sex and you have sexual, two different words. And within the right context, it's necessary to have, I would identify as somebody who likes to mix BDSM and sex, but it's not a must. Sometimes you meet people that you enjoy playing without the without the penetrative sex part, and still having, say, a sexual satisfaction without necessarily having sex. I think that's also another misconception that people should know. BDSM is not sex, but BDSM is a sexual practice at the end of the day, because it revives things within our mind and our body where it relates to our sexual structure or system in our body.
If people were to, want to learn about BDSM, what are the things that they should consider?
First, learn about consent. Consent. It's really important. A lot of time, people think just because they get to be the dom or the dominant, they get to do whatever. Not true. They actually have to go through certain way of earning consent from the submissive, and that takes a lot of communications. Another thing would be the technical bits. Think about it this way. Everything within BDSM and kink are risky. A spanking, somebody may be thinking, oh, it's just a spank, just a light spank. Sure, but you'll never know what kind of reaction you get. You do it harder, maybe you get a better reaction, but you do it harder at the wrong part of the body, you might hurt the tailbone. So knowing anatomy of the body is also very important, especially when you dabble in impact play, which a type of play that involves usually like whipping or spanking or flogging. Also rope bondage is very important to know the anatomy of body, because there are stuff where like you can tie, but you miss an inch, you might cause a nerve damage to your submissive or your bottom. So it's really important, at least from the very first time, is to learn about consent, learn about the technicalities in terms of like safety and anatomy of the body, and also learning how to be honest with yourself. Like, because sometimes like you get people who are like, because they think, say a man should be a dominant, they're like, oh no, like no, I don't like it in the butt. But then, somebody do it and they're denying it, it's also not very healthy for you. So I would say also learning how to be honest with yourself, what you feel within your body, what you feel in your head, and accepting it, embracing it, owning it as part of yourself is also very important.
How was the reaction from your closest ones when you...
So back then I was pretty much a closeted Kinkster. Nobody knew that I like being treated that way, or I like treating some other people in a certain way. I recently came out around, I think, 2016, when I started to get involved in co-founding a BDSM community here in Bali. And that's when people start to know that, oh, she's kinky, oh, she's da-da-da. My closest people, friends, cousin, siblings, well, my siblings doesn't necessarily know deep about that, but obviously they're gonna know after this video. But yeah, they know I'm a little bit like not conventional. The rest, friends, bosses, even clients, they're pretty alright. Because at the end of the day, what I do in the bedroom, and say all these fantasies and whatnot, it doesn't make me less of a human being. It's just more about me being a bit more vocal about it. And again, like I've had people who work with me, I've had people who hang out with me, and I'm just another ordinary person. Like it's not like I'm suddenly becomes like a very creepy kind of person. I can be, but that's not really a point, isn't it? But yeah, everyone's pretty much okay about it.
How do you explain this lifestyle to people who? How would you explain it to people who doesn't understand BDSM at all?
How? I would say in a very, it really depends on who I'm talking to. So if I meet someone who is not, who never knew who I was, say a friend of a friend from abroad or something, and my friend usually, they love to kind of like talk a bit about this. They're like, oh, Tia likes doing this and this and this and this. And I was like, how do I explain it? I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what I do, but it doesn't, it doesn't make me treat you different. The only time I would possibly owe a bit of more explanation is when I'm in a public space with one of my partners who's my submissive or something, and I'm doing a little bit of a discreet public play, and somebody see, and that's when I'm like, hey, look, we're just fooling around. We're just, we're two consenting adults. It's not like I'm with a minor or anything. And if you think that, some sort of abuse is happening or whatnot, I'll let my partner to speak whether it's abuse or not. Something like that. But essentially, in terms of lifestyle, Kinkster as a term, again, it's more of a lifestyle. So I do it still, but it's not something that obviously like I go everywhere and I like whip people off, like. So yeah. So in BDSM you have dominant, you have submissive. Usually also you have all sorts of different roles. You have master and slave, you have top and bottom, you have caregiver and little. It's a lot of different, like even owner and pet, right? There's a lot of different kind of like theme of roles in BDSM, and this is not a role. This is not a role. It's more of a something that we just do, and this thing called switch, which mean I can play in two different roles. Not necessarily with the same partner, not necessarily at the same time, but also not necessarily in a separate time and place. There's also sadomasochist, which combines sadist and masochist in one word, and typically it's also being defined as somebody who dabbles in pain-related department. In terms of like they like hurting somebody, but they also like being hurt physically, and the what kind of actions that is covered there, it's big range. But yeah, I am a switch, pretty much.
Doing this helps you deal with your self-acceptance, or is it like you feel liberated because, oh, this is who I am?
A lot, yes. It also helps a lot when, so I don't recommend this to be done with by a lot everyone, but when you find a partner that you can trust, that you're very intimate with, you're very close with, sometimes, like for example, I had one of my partners who used to have a very strong difficulty in releasing emotions or articulating some sort of emotions. kink helped him quite a fair bit in a way that he can release that bottle of emotions when we're playing. But this is also another precautions where, as I said, I don't recommend this to like for everyone to do, because it requires a very strong level of connection and trust, and if you don't trust like the other person enough, don't do it. How I see it within myself is that it helps with embracing different parts of me, because like human beings is essentially a very multifaceted being, right? We have, you know, all sorts of different labels. Somebody can be a father, a husband, an employee, an athlete, all at the same time. So it's pretty much the same in how I deal with myself when I'm going into that activities where, like, when I meet somebody who I can trust enough, I can be who I am. Either being somebody who's very submissive, very surrendering and stuff like that, or very like dominant and just embracing control. That helps a lot in how to deal also in the vanilla or the normal life, so to speak. So I can kind of adjust myself in a way that I know when to, like, okay, to compromise, and I know when I'm like, no. That's how I see it as helpful.
Adakah pelajaran hidup yang ingin Anda sampaikan ketika dipandang sebelah mata?
Because we know kamu udah dapat judgment banyak orang,
Yeah.
kan? So many people look you down.
Yeah.
And how you manage to deal and overcome it, stand for yourself.
I would say just masuk kuping kanan, masuk keluar kuping kiri. I mean, it may sound very easy, but just believe in yourself. It sounds cliche, but when we put our value on somebody else's control, that's what happened. But when we put our value being standardized by ourselves in a way that is healthy, and not like, oh, I'm the most prettiest girl ever. Like, that's different. But like, when you're so sure about who you are and you know who you are, and nobody can tell it's different, that's when I can say, I don't care. People can talk about anything about me, and I'll be like, well, this is who I am. There's nothing gonna be like, of course there's room for improvement, room for learning, room for changing for the better, and feedbacks and criticism. That's absolutely, we need it as a human being. But I disagree when it comes to, like, oh, my value is on the other person, and if somebody says I'm not pretty, I'm like, go f yourself. Or like, oh, this is the you know, you're not, what are you, like, you're gaining so much weight now, like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, you know what, some people just don't have the ability to go to gym because they don't have time, or whatever. But at the same time, that's my usual deflection of an excuse. But at the end of the day, like, I don't care also. Like, even if I gain so much weight to a point where, like, you know, I don't look the same anymore, most likely I will say it's okay. Like, it doesn't make me less of myself. I gain weight, okay. Do I need to want to lose it? Maybe. But if I don't, I don't. Like, people should learn not to put their value on somebody else's hand. Because when they do that, that's what happens. That's when, oh, I gained so much weight, oh, like, all this, like, I have a lot of friends who have body dysmorphia. they can be already very slim, but they think they're fat, or I see some other people who are like, maybe beyond their average weight, and then they think they're very slim. Whichever way, as long as it's healthy, everything is about moderations, right? If you feel good in your body, if you feel, feel good about your identity, who you are, you know who you are, nobody can say anything else. Like, I know who I am, and even if I still do, I'm sure some people still don't know some part of themselves. I still don't know some part of myself also, but it doesn't make me judging who I am. Also, yeah, stop judging yourself. It's a very self-sabotage trait pattern, and I don't think it's should be applicable. It should be applied. People should start to kind of like, you know what, it's okay. It's okay, just relax, things are gonna go your own way. And sometimes it's accept what you can control. What you cannot control is the best medicine. Sometimes I know a lot of people also like, oh, I want to control my image, I want to control my person, I want to control my lover, I want to control la la la. But time to time, there are things that are like, you just can't control it, you just need to accept it. I can't control what people say about me, but I can control how I react to it. So if somebody says, this and that and da da da, oh yeah, she's been an odd egg or something like that. Yeah, I am an odd egg, but it doesn't make me less of a human being unless I'm doing something like heinous. That's different. But most of the time, I'm being weird doesn't mean you're wrong, but you can be wrong when you're doing something that is hurting other people in a way that's not consensual. That's how I see it. Yeah.
So, why do you think some people are afraid to be themselves?
I think it's because they're afraid of things are unknown, especially about themselves. I mean, we have this, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, it's in our nature anyway. We, built as a being that when we don't know about something, we have the flight or freeze pattern, right? But when it comes to the inwards of themselves, they can't really escape. So I think that's a lot of reason why a lot of people are afraid of being themselves. And also, of course, circumstances that doesn't allow them to be themselves. I've been in positions where I cannot be myself. Not because I cannot, it's because I know if I'm trying to keep it real, people may not take it nicely. So it's also about, knowing when to be yourself. Obviously, say if I'm talking with somebody who is from an older generation who still has a quite traditional view on things, I wouldn't even talk about it. I'll talk about something else. I mean, it's not really their business to know anyway, right? So, but when I'm feeling comfortable enough to talk about it, then I'll talk about it and be myself.
What is your thirst in life? I mean, some people has like callings, and specifically, like for instance, a painter for painting and musician for music. What is your thirst?
My thirst would be making a change, an impact that is positive, especially related to like day-to-day life, but also about like in private stuff, like the bedroom stuff. Because I think us as a nation, a society, unfortunately, still very, most of the time, still very judgmental about this kind of things, or facing diversity. So people get really, this is like discriminations, persecutions, and stuff like that. That is something that I want to change. Apart from that, creative channels. I mean, I own a business where we work a lot with different type of businesses and clients that requires different things, and being creative and how to like help businesses communicate their brands, telling a story about their brands through all sorts of different medium is something that I like. Another thing would be, I just newly recognized this as well, where I mean, I refuse to call myself an artist, but I love telling stories through performing arts. I mean, some people like doing music, some people like, painting, etc. I think performing arts is something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy the creative process. I enjoy the kind of the nervousness and the thrill on the stage, not knowing necessarily how the audience going to react, but at the same time giving all myself in that performance where I can let out my own stories in a way.
So you're a storyteller in a way.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it's such a cliche title, to be honest with you, but yeah, I guess it is what it is.
But why do you refuse to call yourself as an artist?
I don't know. I'm just not there yet, I think. I'm just not there yet. I mean, I mean, everybody can be an artist. Even the most technical type of work of an engineer, he or she's an artist. Everyone can be an artist, I think, but it does makes a difference when there's certain kind of talents that is involved in a particular type of art. I would say that I'm not exactly an artist because despite whatever experiences that I have, it's mostly all personal experience. It's not really something that I was say born with like musical talents or something like that. I would say I'm much more of a good communicator, not necessarily an artist, but I know how to articulate things, and it is something that I would dare say that I was born with as a talent, I guess, but in terms of a particular, if we're talking traditional definition of an art, then I'm not an artist.
But do you see what you do as an art form?
In regards to my performances, the Kink performances, yes. I do consider it as an art because we have a lot to think about from the concept, from the choreography, to the outfit, to blocking in the stage and making sure everybody can see what we're doing and enjoy what we're doing, and telling a story at the same time. It's definitely a bit of an art in itself. And obviously having the knowledge on how to whip somebody in real life, but also in a performative kind of act is a bit different from like when you're doing it privately. So that's those kind of thing. I would say it's an art form.
What is your favorite part or moment when you're doing it? Is it when people are giving you pauses when you perform, or the process, or like when you're doing it and when you're feeling like satisfied?
I would say everything about it. So the pre-performance, the creative process, in like the making of, I enjoy that. The performance itself, I enjoy it. And the post-performance, not about the applause or anything. My actual favorite moment was when I did a performance back in October, and when we finished, I was trying to get a drink, and then a girl came to me and said, "Hey, oh my God, that was so cool." I was like, "Oh, thanks." And then my co-performer was next to me, and she said, this girl said, well, more like asking, it's like, "Are you girls together?" I'm like, "Oh no, we're not. We're really good friends. That's our boyfriend right there." I was like, "Oh my God, your chemistry is right. Like, I can see your chemistry. I can see your connection." I'm like, that's like the ultimate compliment, I would say. Not the ovations, whatever things. It's more about how people can feel the emotions that we're trying to deliver in the performance, and the connections, and relating to it to a point where like they think we're together when we're actually not. That's probably one of the like best moment here, pretty much. Yeah.
But it's interesting because during your performance you're being vulnerable at the same time, and you're delivering something to the audience, and then you're feeling emotions within yourself and then to other people. Like, can you tell us more about that?
Okay, so the only, I guess, the kind of thing, the thing that make a difference between say kink performance to say a dance performance or a play act is that when, for example, say when I'm being the top, or the dominant in the play, I can feel that I'm going into what we call as dom space, a very heightened level of focus, where like all I'm focusing on is the submissive. Everyone's around was pretty much, it's not like they're not existent, I can see them, but my focus was there. Some friends told me that when they saw me in that sense, like in that state of mind, I don't look like myself. Like I look like somebody else. But the truth is, it's still part of me. But would I classify it as acting? Not necessarily, because we actually feel that emotion as well. I actually feel that emotion as well. It's the same thing when I'm performing as a submissive or a bottom in one of our performances. It's the same thing. I would, every stroke of a whip, let's say, or every touch or things, that's also like real. Like it's not just like, oh yeah, like like, oh, it's nice, but it's actually real. And to to kind of make it comical, I would say the difference between performing this and role playing this as a performance compared to like acting as an actor would be like, I get wet after that. That's the difference.
On the stage.
On stage. But I mean, obviously nobody knows about it, right? Nobody knows about it. But it's after that, I'm like, typically I would say to my co-performer, I was like, oh my God, that was so hot. But it's the result. It's the inevitable result of that thing. I mean, it's different when you're doing acting as an actor. for film, let's say, you're only simulating. You're not actually doing it. You're not like, you know, that's I would say that's the different aspect, I guess. Yeah, I mean, as we talked earlier before, at the end of the day, BDSM is a sexual practice. It comes from a desire to feel something sexually without necessarily, you know, having penetrative sex. So at the end of the day, if you know somebody can't even own it, then you're doing. Yeah, but then again, it's a really great way to like immerse yourself into something that you possibly didn't or never thought you would enjoy, or you would explore, or you would actually embracing it as part of you. But yeah, that's pretty much the most candid way to say it. That's the result.
What are your pet peeves? Do you have any?
Pet peeves. In terms of relating with someone in this kind of
In this context. And
context, yeah. First one, say the vanilla stuff. Yeah, my pet peeves would be saying somebody saying something and not somebody saying something that they're gonna do something but they don't do it. That's my biggest pet peeves. Another one would be pure impoliteness, just, you know, being a dick, basically. In the kink world, my pet peeves would be anyone, a dominant or a submissive, who says they don't have limits. That's my biggest pet peeves. That's when the siren just that's just like, yep, no. Like, you need to know at least some sort of way that within yourself, a limit. Because when you don't have a limit, things can get very wrong very quickly. And especially when you don't talk about, like, you don't discuss things before you're jumping into bed, let's say. That's when it gets really, really like potentially problematic. So if somebody says, "Oh, I'll be your best slave. I don't have limits. You can do whatever you want with me," and I'm like, "Oh, hold your horses." So that would be something that I would call as my biggest pet peeves.
So it's about boundaries then.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the difference between boundaries and limit in the world of kink, it's almost the same, but boundaries typically more about the relations that going around in the dynamic, psychological stuff, and like, you know, like deal breaker or deal maker type of thing. Limits is in BDSM you have soft limits, which are things that you don't necessarily have the biggest turn on when you're doing it, but you can possibly still do it with the right partner. But it's not something you're chasing for. And then you have hard limit, which is a big no-no. Like, you don't discuss about like I just don't want it, period. You don't owe an explanation. You don't have to explain anything. It's just a big no-no, you know. So I have a soft limit. I have a few hard limits on within myself, but I have a lot of things that I say I'm comfortable to do, and I would chase for it, and I would desire for it.
From your experience, would you say that if someone feels really good within their body, like from their five senses stimulating, whether it's from being a kinkster or like cooking, or like, can you like change to become a better person from doing that?
I mean, everyone has their own way of knowing themselves. Everyone has their own way avenues in exploration of themselves. It definitely has to start with a will that I want to get to know myself better. But also knowing that there are some stuff that you don't even know about yourself. So with that intention, I mean, you can do anything. I didn't study to become for a particular job. I studied philosophy, which I got dropped out as well. So first, it's not really a practical skill to have, and second, I dropped out. It's not even like something that I can say. I studied as I want to be a doctor. I studied medicines, and I want to be a doctor. I didn't even know what I wanted to be. I didn't even know what I good at when I was younger, right? But everyone's at that age shouldn't know what they want to be or shouldn't know who they are, right? But yeah, it's all back kind of like try to get to know yourself better, and having that intention, keeping an open mind, and also not judgmental towards yourself. As long as it's start from that kind of mindset, usually it becomes a better flow. And I refuse to say to become a better person. It's not about being a better person. It's more about self-actualizations. The more true yourself, I would say the better, because the further you are from being true to yourself, that's when things get really, really messy, and you get tangled in situations that you're not comfortable in because you're not being true to yourself. But at the same time, it's good to have that criticism towards, say, the system or patriarchy or whatever things, but it doesn't also mean that you get to put it on other people and forcing other people to have it. Sometimes people just don't want to have it, and that's fine. That's their own business. That's the way I see it. This is how I see my life. This is how I see myself, and this is how I want to be. But I don't think it's for everyone. And if anybody wants to kind of pursue the same thing through different ways, help yourself. Yeah.
Could you tell us your most coolest, amazing experience?
Oh dear, I have a few. Wait, vanilla or like kinky?
Kinky.
Oh, okay. First one would be when I had a relationship with a man who eventually became a master, or my master. We lived together in the same house, and the dynamic that was established was that he's the master, I'm the slave, right? Slave. We both work individually. He has his own career, I have my own career, etc. But we obviously domestically together. Not until maybe almost a year or so, I find out that he's a switch. And back then I was obviously I was submissive, I was a slave, but at the same time I knew that I'm naturally dominant and assertive in day-to-day life. I chose to be submissive with him because it allows me to balance things. Now, when I found out that he's a switch and he proposed ideas, things to play with, etc., obviously I was not sure. I was nervous. I'm like, what if I hurt him? And all those sort of things. But then throughout this process, I found out that I actually enjoy being dominant, and that was quite an amazing, cool thing that I discovered back in 2015, and then that's like roll over into like different things. But the second coolest moment, which is probably even on the highest top tier still, back in 2019, I was having a dynamic with a man who's also a switch, and there are times where, because we're a switch, and we were very fluid, so to speak, within our role play, so there would be times where we would wrestle with each other, trying to figure out who's the top for the night. And trying to like get all of things. I mean, it's not recommended, because obviously it's better to have a discussion prior and kind of fix the role, who's the dom, who's the sub. But when this is what happens when like the connections and trust and intimacy were all kind of like binded really well together. So this one night, I pretty much got him tied up on a bed, right? And I was kind of fooling around a bit, and I kind of challenged him. I said, "Look, if you get out, if you manage to get out of this restraint and fight me, we'll see who's the top for tonight." And then he was just like right up. He's just like, "Yep." And then it's a great way to kind of goes back into, when we were a kid, we likes to play around, right? It's the same for us. So like when we're being adult, it doesn't mean we stop playing, but I guess it's kind of a bit like sports as well. It's like you're doing badminton, for example. You play around and you kind of like fighting over who's the winner type of thing. For us, it's kind of the same thing, except when when I lose, I get fisted. Something. So yeah.
Okay. Before we said goodbye, tell us another joke.
Oh God, bit of pressure here.
The kinkiest joke.
No, I like.
The joke from the kinky circle.
Oh.
Not the funniest stuff.
Huh?
Not the funniest stuff.
Okay, let's see. What would a woman tell a man when he's like treating her well?
Thank you? No?
Nope. Good boy. Didn't see that coming, didn't ya? Okay. What's next?
The other joke.
Oh, another joke?
Another joke and then bye-bye.
Oh God. Oh God. What would God? This is a bit of a pressure here, man. I'm trying to think. What would an adult woman say to a man when he's dining and whining her, and treating her like princess and all that thing? What would the woman say to him? No idea?
No.
Just take me home, Daddy.
Okay. Say goodbye.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the sharing. I hope you enjoyed the content and the stories. Cheerio.